European ministers are in Washington for urgent discussions surrounding the fate of Greenland amid US President Donald Trump's continued push to acquire the territory. Denmark's foreign minister will meet with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President Vance today. That follows a visit by Germany's foreign minister with Rubio earlier in the week. I'm being joined by DW's Stephen Birtsley to get us the latest from Berlin. Stephen, good to have you. What do you think we should expect from today's meetings?
That's right. Involved in this meeting are on the Danish and the Greenlandic side, their foreign ministers, also the foreign minister, the Secretary of State of the U.S., Marco Rubio, but also Vice President Vance, and that could make things interesting. Now, what we're expecting from the Danish and Greenlandic side is what we've been hearing to this point, which is it's in Greenland's right to express its own intent, to exercise its own sovereignty, essentially. And that is a message that also the German Foreign Minister Johann Vadeful brought when he talked with Marco Rubio earlier this week. If the meeting lasts long enough, if it's taking a constructive turn, then there could even be discussion about NATO involvement in Greenland, about the involvement of European states in terms of Arctic security, what they could do to reassure the U.S. The real question is what they're going to meet on the American side. Now, this was planned as a meeting with Marco Rubio on the foreign minister level, but then J.D. Vance said that he wanted to join, and now he's hosting the meeting. And we know that Marco Rubio has tended to portray much more of a moderate stance on this issue. Again, Johann Vadeful, when he met with Rubio, coming out of that meeting, saying that he was reassured on the Greenland issue. But J.D. Vance, of course, brings a much more Trumpian hard line, and that's going to be the question: is what's going to happen when J.D. Vance is there? Could there even be a press availability, which also brings other certain dangers when Vance is there? So I think we're going to have to ask that question of what's going to happen with the Americans here.
And what's at stake for Europe in these discussions?
When you look at the past year, you could say this is a relationship between the EU and the U.S., or Europe in general and the U.S., that really has eroded. When you look at the tariffs that the U.S. has implemented in Europe, when you look at the way that the U.S. has talked about Europe and its laws and its domestic policies, something that U.S. presidents before have usually stayed out of. And when you look at the recently released national security strategy that was just a few months ago, in which it warned that Europe was facing what it called civilizational erasure due to its migration policies, all of those highly offensive for Europe. But what's happening with Greenland is something that could be explosive. And that's everything. That's what we're hearing from every minister, from every head of state that we're talking to, is that this is something that really puts NATO itself on thin ice. And of course, NATO is incredibly important for Europe. The U.S. in particular bringing certain strategic weaponry, certain strategic kinds of capabilities that Europe frankly doesn't have. That's important as you have a rearmed Russia on the continent. And so that's why it's really important that NATO stay as it is. Another issue here is Europe and how much sway it has in the foreign affairs arena. That is a question that's being asked more and more here as these issues come up. Look also at Iran right now and the protests going on there. You have a U.S. administration that's talking openly about intervening there, and the EU, Europe, basically feels like they're observers to this point.
Also, Stephen, is there a way out of the current situation that doesn't damage the relationship between the U.S. and Europe?
It's clear that this relationship has been damaged under the Trump administration. The question is if it's going to explode with something happening to NATO. Now, I spoke last week with the Greenlandic Minister of Mining. That's Naya Nathanielsen. She's part of the coalition, the governing coalition. And we talked about a range of issues from mineral resources in the territory to everything going on right now, of course. She said, look, there is room for collaboration. There's room for something constructive. We can do things. We can talk with them. We see ourselves as being in the sphere of U.S. interests. That's very clear. We want to act in that way. We're taking measures to exclude investment from Russia and from China. However, she said, what we don't have is respect. We're not treated with respect from the U.S., and that makes it hard for us to do anything. So I think that's what's expected from the Greenlandic and the Danish side here. The question is really how the U.S. wants to play this, if this is going to be a very bombastic approach from Trump, and if that's going to be carried through into this meeting. That's, I think, something that we're going to find out on Wednesday.
All right, Stephen, thank you so much for those updates from Berlin. Good to have you.